this is our 10th year in business. These shows are available at Cary Library and also the Historical Society. And as I think about it and think about the topics, we go back to the 17th century. We've had several shows talking about Lexington's earliest days, talking about the days before it was even Lexington. And our very first show with John Quinlan covered Lexington in the 20th century, and I think maybe a little before. I've forgotten when he was born, but his memories of the town a century and more ago were really fascinating. So they're available to you if you're interested. As I say, at Cary Library and at the Historical Society. We're starting off 2015 with my old friend Bob Sacco, who has a great story to tell, both about his own story and the story of the Lexington Press, which he owned and operated for many years, and the story of the building in which the Lexington Press operated. So tell me, Bob, what was your early first connections with Lexington?
That started in 1973. To go back to talk about my own personal biography, I'm born and brought up in Brooklyn, New York. I was working for a company in New York City called Allen Wayne I started there in 1958. In 1960, they asked me to come up to Massachusetts to represent them as a salesman selling to all of the big industrial defense companies.
What was their products?
Technical manuals and proposals and the printed product. They were specialists in turning out huge proposals in a very short amount of time for delivery to the government on big contracts for companies such as Raytheon, MITRE, Sylvania. Well, just about the time that Route 128 was growing, this is back in 1960, 128 was taking over as Electronics Row, and this is just a perfect environment for our services. We would typically take a 2,000 or 3,000 page proposal and turn it out over a weekend for these companies, and there weren't many people even interested in doing that type of thing because the net result was printing maybe 40 or 50 copies.
Yeah, right.
Most printers at that time wanted to do 4,000 or 5,000 copies, so they weren't interested in the short run market. And that's where I basically came from. I'm a short run specialist, doing short run printing long before the Xerox machine came out, and it was a very big challenge at that time for the for the equipment that was there. In 1960, I married my wife, and we moved up to Brookline, Massachusetts, Brooklyn, New York, which was Brooklyn 46 New York, to Brookline, Massachusetts, coincidentally, which is 02146. It was actually, I think it was Brookline 46, Massachusetts, that eventually became the zip code. We lived there for a while and then moved out to Waltham and started a facility. And it was about 2 years after we moved up. We started a facility to be able to print. Prior to that, all the jobs that we took, we sent to New York. Everything was done in New York. We had a crew of maybe 50 specialists that did nothing but type, run equipment, run the printing equipment, and they would just be brought in on a part-time basis and come in and knock out one of these proposals.
Now, who wrote the proposal?
The company,
company?
yeah, Raytheon,
Yeah, I see. So
Sylvania.
you were printing it.
We were the
You
production
had
end.
nothing to do with the content.
That's correct. Well, we're printing it, we were preparing the copy at that time, we were using IBM executive typewriters and multi-lith machines, all set up to do short-run printing.
Was it flatbread bled?
No, this was offset at that
presses,
time.
or-
No, these were multi-liths and they were offset presses.
Okay,
The
so
big-
you weren't into linotype machines?
Not at that time.
Yeah,
Not at that time. I backed into it when I bought Lexington Press because
yeah,
Lexington Press was almost all letterpress. Letterpress far into the time that they should have been into offset. They just
yeah.
never responded. It was like
We'll get to that.
it's like company doing buggy whips at the times when they were turning out Fords.
Yeah.
You know? It was destined to end.
We'll talk about that. So
Yeah,
then you were in Waltham,
right.
and you're still living in Brooklyn.
No, we moved to Waltham.
Ah, okay.
And from Waltham, we moved out to Ashland, Massachusetts.
You couldn't stay still. could
No.
you?
Well, this is all over a period of about 13 years.
Ah,
So it wasn't as if we were moving every 6 months, but we did move. We wound up in Ashland, bought our home for the first time. Prior to that, everything was rent, and
And this would have been,
well, let me just tell you how I got to Lexington.
yeah,
One day I'm in the office at Allen Wayne, which was downtown Waltham, and there's a phone call. Hi, are you interested in buying a printing company? I said, why should I be interested in buying a printing company? Well, there's one for sale in Lexington. I said, there's no printing, no decent large printing company in Lexington. Oh yeah, they have a 10,000 foot facility in Lexington Center. I said, come on, you're kidding. Oh yeah, and attached to the printing plant is a house. It's part of the deal. I said, a house and a business? At that time I was having problems, let me say. I don't want to go into detail with it, but I was having a problem with the corporate directors of Allen Wayne, the company that out of New York. I had started 4 other facilities, Allen Wayne in Washington, D.C., and Allen Wayne in Georgia, Allen Wayne in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And, these were all fell under me as the vice president, or actually the president of the company. The owner of the company had moved up to chairman of the board.
so you were president of the company at this point.
At that point, I was president, again, due to all the facilities that I ran. We had one in Arlington, Virginia, servicing the government. And again, in Puerto Rico and Georgia. I wasn't really
So New
big.
York wasn't really the headquarters
Yes, it
anymore.
was.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it was. That
Yeah.
was part of the problem. It meant that I had to leave my house early in the morning on Tuesday, and I wouldn't get home till Friday night. Coming to New York or Washington, and it felt like I was on a treadmill because as soon as I got one facility up and running and established, well, Waltham's not doing too good. You better get down there and see what's going on. 2 months later, Washington was having problems. You got to hire a new salesman in Washington. And I spent all my time in Washington or New York. And it was fun. I had a lot of time, but it got to the point I just didn't see the family at all. Just gone most of the time. So I was looking around, and when this call came, it was from a fellow named Bob Tillinghast. And I don't know how many people remember him, but he was a real estate person who had convinced the previous owner of the building that the press, the building of the press, would make a fantastic condominium. This is when condominiums are coming in. This is 1972, I guess. Yeah. And he convinced the owner that he could really turn that into 10 condominium units. The only problem was he didn't convince the neighbors. The neighbors went through the roof when they heard they were going to have 10 families moving in with kids, with cars and traffic. And God help them, they would lose their their soccer court that they had turned the lawn of the press into. How could we take this away from the, it was unbelievable. Anyway, they came down against them, and the zoning board voted against a variance to use that as residential property. And there was, Tillinghast had already taken the real estate fee. Mike had given him the money. So he had to go out and find somebody to buy the building. Yeah, I mean, already, and he couldn't.
How did he know you, or you know him?
He went through the telephone book. And again, I was at Allen Lane, it was right at the front. It's probably the third or fourth company he called. And he was just going through printing companies. So I said, well, I'll come down and look at this. I can't believe it. There's no 10,000 square foot building containing a printing company in Lexington. I figured the guy was lying to me.
Yeah.
So I went down, I met him, and I walked into the facility, and it just blew my mind. They were at least 40 years behind the business. There was a company, Lexington Press was a company that was started by Gardner Maxey and Mike Scanlon. Gardner was the general manager and Mike was the production manager for Colonial Printing out in Clinton. They had at that time one of the largest book printing facilities in the world. I mean, the building was 1 square mile. You drive around to get around the building. You either had to use roller skates or a bicycle. I mean, you just couldn't walk from one office to another. And they left that environment to start, at that time, Lexington Press. That was 1955. And they ran it successfully, but it was book printing only. The short-run book printing was their forte. People may remember Gardner. Gardner and his wife were very, very active in Lexington.
Right.
And Alan Adams owned the building prior to that. Now everybody knows Alan.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. So they bought it from Alan?
That's correct. Well, Alan and the group that he had put together, Leon Burke,
just
Ann Sigliano.
You're right.
Remember, they had created this conglomerate, this group, to set up Minuteman Publications and Lexington Minuteman.
Right. And Alan was a long-term, well, he was born here, I guess.
Yeah, oh yes.
And then his father, as I remember the story, bought the Minuteman newspaper.
And turned it over to him, yeah.
And Alan picked up the press at the same time, or do you remember?
Well, no, I'm not sure how that happened. It wasn't part of my knowledge. I just know that Gardner Maxey and Mike Scanlon purchased the building and what was called Adams Press. Alan Adams, right?
Right.
It was Adams Press. At this time, we're going back to the 1960s, there wasn't a copy shop on every corner of the world, the Pips and the Speedies and everything else. So if you needed printing, you usually went to what were weekly newspapers. Now the weekly newspaper would print 1 day a week. All the rest of the day, the presses sat idle. So they used the press time and the pressmen during the interim to do what they call job printing. Business cards, stationery, letterheads, reports, anything else they can get out. That portion of the work, the job printing plant, became Adams Press.
Yeah, and I remember visiting with Alan in that building,
right.
His office, and
yeah.
His wife Becky worked there.
Yeah.
And of course Alan Adams was a major player in
big
town
right.
For a long time. He was Republican, which everybody was except me. But we were very close.
Even then, you were contrarian, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was a great fellow.
Yeah, but you're right. Everything was pretty well.
Right. And I remember the vast area where they had flatbed presses, and
Right, because
linotype machines,
Yep.
and if you wanted anything printed, that was where you went. You
Right.
didn't go anyplace else.
I found jobs, and they still had copies of them up in the attic when we finally sold the building and had to move everything out. Believe me, that was an effort, getting that place cleaned out, because people who bought it needed to have it right down to the building. That's all they wanted in there. I had to get every press out of there. Well, we're getting ahead of the story a little bit.
Yeah, so you decided to, and where was the house? What house?
Okay, the house, a little house. If you look directly at the building, there's a house to the left.
And this building is, where is it exactly?
It's right on Oakland Street, to the left of the main building.
So
It is
you
a
go
house-
on Merriam Street.
No, it's Oakland Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go Merriam to Oakland, take a right on
Right.
Oakland, and you go past the building. And
On
at
the
very end, on the right.
And the big
Parking lot is
municipal parking
behind.
lot right
That's
behind it.
correct, yeah.
That big old long building.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was there for a long time.
And the house was where?
The house was to the left of the property, right on just a little bit of a elevation, higher elevation. It was originally set up to support the fireman who took care of the building and stoked the furnace in the morning for the previous owner, not Alan Adams. Alan didn't need that. The previous owner was, the owner was the company that originally set up the building. The building, as close as we can say, was set up in 1870, just shortly after the Civil War ended. M.H. Merriam filed for a building permit to put up a building that would house his shoe finding factory. Shoe findings, the tongues in shoes, the bias that's used. They also made stays for girdles. He had a business in Charlestown. He wanted to move closer to home. He had a house in Lexington, so he wanted to get closer to home. So he bought that building. Well, I'm sorry, he erected that building. The front of the building was a barn on Patriots Drive, Goodwin Estates, and they physically bought it over there, and that became the main office of the building. And it was just a long building for manufacturing. They needed the length. The building is 200 feet long, but they needed the length to be able to stretch out the bands and the leather that they had to process.
So this is 1870.
1870, yeah, M.H. Merriam. I never found out what the M.H. is, but knowing Lexington at that time, it was probably a very religious name.
Yeah.
Matthew Henry or whatever.
Yeah.
But in all the research, I never found it.
Now Bob, that must have been the first manufacturing enterprise in the center of town.
Oh, yeah.
With the tanneries and stuff in East Lexington.
Right.
But
East Lexington and Woburn was very big too.
Yeah.
They used to provide the leather for the manufacturing process. And I found invoices that written in 1870, purchase orders buying from people down there. There's a place that they call the Leather Center in Boston. No, it's not coming to me, but that's why we're here for. Lexington remembers of the
Yeah.
past. But this is big. This is very big back in the mid-1800s. Provided a lot of jobs for the people in and around Lexington. They also made millenary bands for hats. I had a picture which has disappeared, and I would love to find out the person who took it, but about 6 women standing on the staircase in the back of the press, all wearing these magnificent hats, all with the military material supplied by the
So
press.
they make corset stays.
Right.
And
Shoe findings. They
right.
didn't make the actual shoes, but they
Right.
made everything else but the shoes.
Yeah.
They didn't make the soles or the heels, but they made everything else needed to create a shoe. And we talk about that small building.
Yeah.
Okay, again, the building housed what they call the fireman. His job was to be there. They didn't have sprinkler systems back in 1870, and his job was to be there if there was a fire. You know, the big clanging bell on the outside of the building that would go off if there was any heat. However, well, at that time, they probably didn't put the sprinkler system until about the 1900s. But he was there in the event of a fire, and also to get up at 4 in the morning to put coal in the boilers to get the steam engine going. They had a big steam engine in the ceiling, and it would be used to turn the cranks, the
belt.
the belts,
Yeah.
which would turn the belts, which would allow them to cut and sew the material. It was a pulley system. It was unbelievable. These people were mechanical geniuses.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever went into the building, everything's an 8x8. I mean, we use 2x4s. They used 8x8s to do everything. In terms of the basic construction of the building was similar to the construction of the Constitution.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They used. Let's see. They used trees, the actual tree, for the corner. You know, the one that would come down, and they were placed every 10 feet throughout the building. And the building was 200 feet long, so there were 20 of these things that supported a 8x8 beam that ran across the entire width of the building. It was fully system with no support in the middle. These beams
It was
supported
clear
the
in the
entire
middle.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
all the way.
And the steam engine was on the second floor?
Yep, I was on the second floor of the barn, because that's where the focus of the energy came from to turn the
And where was
to
the
turn
furnace
machines.
that he
Off to
shoveled
the right,
coal in?
you would see it if you drove by the back of the building on the Miriam Street lot.
Yeah.
You see a brick part of the building. That housed the boiler room. And the chimney is there too, so you could see it.
And the coal bin must have been
Oh,
there
coal
too.
bin was there, yeah. They used to have the coal delivered once or twice a week.
Yeah.
A week.
Yeah.
And I got there, and once or twice a week, or a month, the oil company would come. And we were heating the Lexington parking lot.
Yeah.
So,
Now, do you know if Allen owned the Adams building?
I think the group that Alan had put together, Ann Sigliano,
Leon
Dave
Burke.
Lavender, Leon Burke, there were 5 of them, I believe.
Yeah.
They owned that building.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you know what?
That's
It
good.
could have been Alan holding the building and just allowed the other people, Minuteman Publications,
Yeah,
to work out of the building.
yeah, yeah.
No one had
I can't remember.
Yeah,
That's where my son Tom has his law office. is in the
Exactly,
Adams
yep.
building.
yeah.
Okay,
And
so.
when I moved to Lexington, Minuteman Publications was being run out of that building.
Right,
With
okay.
facilities out in Framingham.
Okay. All right, so Maxie then wanted to sell the printing company.
Maxie had died by that time.
Okay,
And his wife tried to run the business. When Maxie passed away, had severe diabetes, and he was also quite a smoker, so he didn't make it much past his 50s, 55 or so.
really?
So he passed away, and Mike Scanlon had contracted diabetes also, so he wanted to retire, and he did retire, at about the same time Gardner died, and the wife took over. Now, the income from from Lexington Press at that time was going to provide for Mike's retirement, but within 6 months, half the people just took off in all sorts of directions, starting their own companies, leaving. They just couldn't work for her.
How many people were working?
At that time, probably around 15.
Uh-huh.
He had pressmen, he had liner type up. It was all letterpress. He had one offset press in the back, but neither Mike or Gardner had any. No, this offset's never going to last. The only way to print is to print with letterpress. You got to run the type.
And letterpress is hot lead.
Hot lead, correct.
Type machines.
Correct.
Locked into forms.
Locked
and
into a
flatbed
put down. That's right.
And the press goes back and forth.
Yep, absolutely.
And the sheets come out.
Yeah, and they were big sheets, 38 by 50, 38 by 50 inches. There aren't many presses that size, even an offset today.
Yeah.
Generally, the maximum is a 40-inch sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. So this guy's going through the phone book and
finds me. I come down. I said, Mike. I fell in love with Mike right away. He's my type of guy. He's a guy that had printing ink in his fingernails when I met him for lunch at the Sheraton. But he was a character, and at the same time, Bob Lyons. Bob Lyons had made a bid to buy the building. He was going to.
What was he going to do with it?
I think he felt he could push through a condominium plan.
Oh, okay.
With his contacts and Tillinghast was just too a newcomer. He didn't understand Lexington politics, but felt he could.
Bob and his father been on real estate for a long time.
No,
W.H. Lyon.
That's right. Bob inherited from that and then passed it on to his son. What's his son's name? No, losing that too. There's another one for the middle. All right, where were we? We're in terms of the building and the.
So Lyon made a bid for it.
Yes, exactly. And
but he didn't want the printing company. He just wanted the building.
He wanted the building. He wanted nothing to do with it. Mike would have to get rid of everything. But the price at that time was about $50,000. Okay, Mike needed $100,000 to be able to live. This is back in 1960, so real estate prices aren't where they are today.
$50,000 for the building.
For the whole building, everything, lock, stock, and but Mike also had to clean the building out. Had to get rid of everything to sell it to him. And when I came up, Mike's asking price was $100,000. Can you believe it? $100,000, real estate, the building, all the printing property, all of the customers, and they had some prestigious customers. And the what?
And the fireman's house.
And the fireman's house, the house, which was lived in by a fireman who worked for the Lexington Fire Department, who instituted a law at the time that every fireman had to live in Lexington. At the time, he and his wife, Grace, were living in Hyde Park. And they couldn't afford to come anyway, so they worked a deal with Gardner Maxey and Gardner Maxey and Mike, that they would live in the building and pay $55 a month for it. That's what they were paying when I bought the building.
$55.
Yeah. This is Grace here. She lived there until we sold the building back in 2005. Yep, there she is.
Feed it in there.
Yeah, Grace was the proofreader. She worked at the press as a proofreader and in the bindery. It was introduced to me as a production manager. Okay, Mike was having his share of problems with the people, trying to keep them all together. And I knew I had a problem when she came into me. I had given her some pages, a book to 3-hole punch, and I said, now put it in about 3/8 of an inch, and center the first hole and then measure the other hole, 4 1/4, 4 1/4. Sure. About 2 hours later, she came into me, she says, which one of these sticks is 1/8 of an inch?
Oh.
I said, this was the production manual. I said, oh, well, okay. So we started from scratch, and I brought in my own people
Well,
at that point.
so you decide you're gonna buy the building and the business.
Right.
And the house.
And I was willing to give Mike what he was going to be, what he was going to get for the condo, which was $100,000.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Good old Lions set up an ultimatum. You either sell the house to me by 5 o'clock Wednesday or our offer is off the table. But Mike is looking at 100,000 versus 50,000. I mean, it cuts down on his retirement. He said, I'm going to take a chance on this young kid. He looks like he's an honest person.
How old were you then?
I was 20 in 1960, which is when I got married, my wife.
So you're
I was less than 30.
Mid-30s.
No, less than, well, yeah, okay. In 72, it was 1972, so I was 32 years old.
Yeah.
He still looked at me as a young whippersnapper.
Yeah, of course.
He was in his 60s at that time.
So when he first called, you thought he was crazy, and then you came and looked at him.
Yeah, well, I said, a house. I mean, we'd have, the way I was going to finance it was sell my house out in Ashland because we had equity built in. Use that for the down payment to Mike and then pay him off. He wanted a second mortgage. It was smart because the second mortgage will allow him to get a monthly income.
Right.
And live out his life.
And Maxie's widow,
Right.
where did she fit into this?
She moved to Maine.
Oh.
Yeah, Mike basically threw out of it. It was just go away.
Yeah.
He bought out his stock.
He bought her out.
He bought her stock.
Right.
He wasn't going to do it again. Go through the whole thing. So, and she took the money and moved up to Maine and Squirrel Island, I believe.
Yeah. So 1972, you're in town.
I'm in town. I get to Lexington
and you find this antiquated printing operation.
Right.
And how many people did you have?
There were 19 initially, and most of them are in this.
And had they? Some of them had to have worked for Allen.
Oh yes, his linotype operator, the compositor, the guy who took those linotype slugs and turned them into pages.
Yeah.
The makeup man.
Yeah. So you're kind of surprised at what you found there.
Oh yeah, I was amazed. I mean, this is 10,000 square foot building operated in the center of Lexington.
Yeah.
So we bought the building, bought everything from Mike and paid them all over 10 years through a second mortgage. He outlived that. He wound up having to go back to work. He bought a package store in Clinton where he lived. That's still another story, but I won't get into that. And Mike was a great guy and probably one of the most knowledgeable men in printing at that time.
Now, what kind of printing were you doing when you started?
We were doing exactly the type of printing I'd always been doing.
Yeah.
We were doing it at night. I would work with a second crew that were all offset people. I brought in a couple of offset presses, got them set up, and we worked nights and weekends doing the proposal work for Raytheon, Sylvania, Mida Corporation.
Oh, you're doing the old Allen Wade kind of stuff.
That's correct. Oh yeah, the Allen Wade. That's the business I knew. The short run printing.
Yeah. And then did you what changes did you make?
Well, yeah, we had started with a couple of AB Dicks. I moved. I then bought a 29-inch press, ironically, which was used to print Monopoly boards for Parker Brothers.
Really?
Yeah, he was doing it down in Rhode Island, and he would print proof sheets on that. But it was a used press, I bought it in, and we started running that, a 29-inch single color. Ran that for about 5 years when we bought a Heidelberg. We bought a first really prestigious press. Bought a 4-color Heidelberg, brand new, out of the factory in Germany. I moved that in and put that and replaced one of the old, by that time we had sort of gotten out of the, I was using the letterpress work to just pay the rent. We were making the money on the short run printing to clients like Raytheon. We got involved with some pretty significant stuff with them. They were a very good customer. I had a lot of good friends there that saw the need for the short run printing for the big proposals. And at the time, we were unique because we were up here. Prior to that, with Alan Wayne, most of the jobs that I took, I would send down to New York. We produced them in New York. But this was being done on location here in Lexington. That at first, a lot of guys, and, a lot of the executives at Raytheon.
So you took some of the Alan Wayne
Work, type of work, and brought that into Lexington. I wouldn't have survived without it.
and that meant the Waltham place closed down?
It did, yeah. They did live. I tried to explain to the owner that he couldn't just ignore it. He'd need to bring in a pretty high level salesperson to keep the place running. Just don't worry about it, Bob. Because we'll get things done.
So you picked
six
that
months
stuff
later,
up?
they were gone.
Yeah, okay.
And then it just increased the amount of work that we had.
Yeah, good.
So,
Okay, now, how did you get into Lexington politics? Because you've been a big player.
well, not really, nothing, nowhere near as big as you and what you've done for this town. One day I was approached by a group of people who came to me, said that they were looking for a candidate. I knew nothing about politics. I mean, I was too busy working. It was a typical 80-hour week for us. I'd work in the day trying to keep things going, the letterpress in, so we could keep Harvard Law Review, so we could keep Federal Milk, Psyche, an entomological journal that was produced there, Redora, a botanical journal. They had a lot of prestigious accounts, and I wanted to keep them going so that the people could continue to work, the people that were there before. And it was a pretty interesting meld, bringing the old and the new, the old timers in there, and the new people, illustrators, and people that ran the offset equipment, working together. It was interesting, but we were successful. We were lucky.
And you live in a fireman's house?
No, I couldn't, because, again, there's another story that he told me that the people that were living in the house worked in the company, but they were ready to retire to their home, their summer home in Ipswich. Made sense, right? Mr. Tillinghast was a great creator of tales. It turns out that the summer home they had is just that, summer home. Come October, they turn off the water.
Yeah.
So they couldn't retire to that house. They had to count on living here for as long as, oh my God. Then this came at me the day I passed papers. I knew nothing about that until I passed papers, came back, and we announced to the crew. They didn't know at that time what was happening. Just knew Lexington Press was failing, and they probably weren't going to have a job soon. I came back and announced that I was coming to, that I told them about my background. I came to Lexington to buy this place, and that I was going to continue to run it, and that everybody who was working there at the time would have a job until they decided to leave on their own. I would never lay anybody on. I pretty much held to that. A number of people died while they were still there from different causes, but every single one of them stayed on until they left to their own. They worked there.
So what happened to the fireman's house?
Right. Well, Grace and Tubba, that was the fireman, from Lexington Fire Department, he was an old-timer there, wanted to live there forever. So we moved the rent up a little bit. I think I went up to $100 a month. I said, okay, give me enough to be able to move into a house on my own. They said, stay there as long as you want. And they did, and we moved in right next door to 3 Oakland Street.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And eventually bought 15 Murray Street,
Yeah.
which was
Okay.
on the corner building.
Okay. So, you were just gonna tell me how you got into politics. Who came to you?
Well, a conglomerate, a group of the more conservative people in town. I knew them through the Rotary Club. Jack Maloney, Dave Eagle, Danny Lucas, Ed Shannon, Pat Swanson, I'm sure you remember her,
Oh,
on
very
the
well.
school committee. Yeah. Who else was on it? Bob Cataldo, Lynn Cole. I mean, the more
Yeah.
conservative elements of the town.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a candidate.
For,
And I said, I don't know anything about this. Don't you worry about it. We'll take care of it. They took care of
candidate
it.
for
Selectman. I
selectman.
ran for selectman against a guy named Albert Zabin.
Al
You know,
Zabin.
Al Zabin, yeah, and his wife Judy. And initially they laughed. You know, who is this guy? Who knows her? What does he do? But I managed to pull it off by 250 votes.
And
Yeah,
Al
he was
was,
elected.
had been on the planning board,
Planning
school
board.
committee.
He and his wife were both town meeting members. I think the reason I won is because nobody knew me. I mean,
Yeah.
they really didn't know anything about me, so there
Yeah.
was no way for them to be able to describe.
And when was this then?
1982, I served
Really,
one
you've been
term.
here 10 years.
Yeah, it was 10
Yeah.
years. I had established myself, and by that time I had been president of the Rotary Club, president of the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, pretty active in
Yeah.
that type of, the volunteer end
Yeah.
of politics.
And
Never in politics, never became a town meeting member.
did you enjoy being selected?
No. I didn't like politics at all. I felt most of the people that were in it, no jibes at you, but most of the people in it were intellectually dishonest.
Mhm.
They said anything they needed to say to get whatever particular idea in it. So I served one term and I said, see you later, I'm gone.
Mhm.
Later on, I came back to serve on the Board of Appeals for the town. That I enjoyed.
Mhm.
That was a lot of fun. Enjoyed that, but I couldn't take the politics.
Your colleagues on the board wasn't
Yeah,
much
there was
fun.
Al Booza
Right.
was the chairman.
Fred Bale.
Steve Politi. Nope, Fred had gone by that time. Steve Politi. Marge Batten, God love her. The guy from the telephone company. Who am I thinking of? Treasurer of AT&T. No. Jim.
Claflin?
For selectman, Jim. At that time, he was treasurer of AT&T in Boston. Okay.
Because I can't remember.
Well, there had to be 5 of us, right? Al
Yeah.
Moses, Steve Politi, Bob Sacco, Jim, and Marge Batten.
Oh, I remember him.
Oh, Jim Crane.
Yeah, Jim Crane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a guy. I really had a lot
He
of
was a bright
a
guy.
lot of respect for him. Very fair, modulated, and he addressed the issues. He didn't come
Yeah.
from a particular political point of view
Yeah, I remember
on
him well.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was quite a guy.
So one term was enough. You didn't want
3 years,
anymore.
that was it. I had nothing to do with it. They came to me again, and Oh, my God. Al Boozer, I thought was gonna have a heart attack in my office that day when I said, I'm not running. I said, yes, you are. She's gonna have to run. I said, I'm not running. I said, you told me a lot of things when you first came to me on this that turned out not to be true. And to be quite honest with you, I can't live that type of life. I'm just not gonna do it.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
And that's when Bill Daley came aboard.
Uh-huh.
Bill was there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 terms?
Oh, no.
No?
3 maybe.
3? Okay.
Yeah, I served with Bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Bill took my slot, which eventually...
Yeah, because he was
Peter
chairman of
Kelly.
appropriation.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 He was a natural.
Great guy.
He did a good job.
Great guy.
A chairman, and he moved his town along.
Yeah. So, but you enjoyed the Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals was good. That
Yeah.
was fun. It was just enough in there, and you really didn't get involved in the politics of the town as much.
Yeah.
You were there to serve more as a judicial
Yeah. Yeah.
type of position.
How long were you on the Board of Appeals?
14 years.
Were you?
Yeah. Yeah. Started as a associate member, then
Yeah.
they elected me to the board to 2 terms, and became chairman when, who was it? Somebody had stepped down,
Yeah.
so I became chairman. It was fun.
Yeah. Good.
That was good because I felt I was helping people.
Yeah. Very technical job.
It was. It was.
Yeah. So now you're running the printing company,
Right.
and then what happens? This 1870 building.
Building, yeah,
Right.
yeah, and well, let's talk about the building itself again.
Yeah.
The structure is just unbelievable, and these people from Supportive Living came to me. Supportive Living was a company in Woburn, started by the mother of a child that went to a prom night, and 3 o'clock in the morning the mother gets a call, your son's been in an auto accident, we don't think he's going to live through the night, you better get down here. He did survive, but he had a serious brain injury, and the parents were just completely wiped out. They felt that they would not be able to help their son. You know, and their idea was, what's going to happen when we pass on? This happens a lot in situations where there's a severely handicapped person that doesn't have the parental help.
Right.
So the mother, Carol, went out and started a group. Her husband was a vice president of Cummings Realty, Cummings Park.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And convinced Cummings to give them a building. They had a building. Yeah.
Really?
Just
In Woburn?
in Woburn on Warren Street. Yeah. It was being used for a senior center, but they moved the senior center to another facility, and Supportive Living acquired the building, and Carol and her husband has since passed, got the place going. They've got 4 facilities. Have one in North Reading, there's one in Lexington, the one in Woburn on Warren Street, and they just recently opened one in Rockport.
Really?
Yeah, this is all to help people, survivors of traumatic brain injury, especially now. We've got people coming back from Iraq and the Middle East with these terrifying wounds and injuries. So they've only got room for 15 people here, and they have about 150 on the waiting list.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it a non-profit?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are a lot of government subsidies.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
the government sees the need for it, has to do it against.
So why did they happen to see that building?
I don't know. For whatever reason, they just came to see me one day and said, we understand. Well, it was at that time my wife and I were getting ready to think about retirement. And when they came to us, they came at exactly the right time.
Mm-hmm. And so they had to do a complete build out.
The architect was fantastic. He did a fantastic job.
And everybody on Oakland Street thought this was a terrific idea, and we're all for it.
Oh no, not really.
Yeah. And so when was this that you?
2005. We sold it to them in 2005, but they needed time to put the financing together for the renovation. They had enough money to buy the building from me, but they needed to get some substantial help in doing the construction. So they said, stay as long as you want, and we were there for 2 more years.
Yeah.
We didn't move out till 2007. Never paid a drop of rent.
Yeah.
They took care of real estate. They took care of everything, and it was good because it gave me an opportunity to be able to move the equipment out, phase out, and move the equipment out. And we took the 2 of the best presses and moved them up to my son's farm in New Hampshire. We had this 4-color Heidelberg, which is a premier press, and also the latest digital technology, a Indigo, HP Indigo press.
So the Lexington Press is still functioning?
Oh yes, I work out of my house. I do the quoting and the selling out of my house.
But now you're enough retired so you could run for the board of selectmen?
No.
Well, listen, it's a great story.
Well,
and
it's been a wonderful town. It's really been wonderful for my kids, my wife, and I. We've enjoyed being here. It was a good move to move here in 1972.
Yeah. Well, it was great for the town that you did.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for doing this.
Okay, you're very welcome. See, you didn't know that much, huh? About me at that time. Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.